Welcome to our December coffee chat. It's our final coffee chat of the year. I'm Laura Knudsen-Murray. I'm the GIS coordinator and community outreach assistant for IrisBG. With us today is Shanna Jones, social media and community outreach assistant, and Ivan Riston, founder and CEO of IrisBG. So as with all of our coffee chats, the recording will be made available in the Knowledge Library. You're able to follow the topic, and it will be shared under our articles and presentations. And every time we publish something, you'll be notified via email. So we let everyone know about the coffee chats, but we also wanted to let you know that there are topics that you can follow in the Knowledge Library. That if you want to be notified when we post or someone has a question regarding a specific topic, you can follow those topics as well. I think Shanna is going to post in the chat a link to those. So you can follow any of the topics if it's labeling, since you're here this week to hear about labeling. When we create new tutorials, or if there's a question in the forum, there's also forum topics that you can follow. We've created a few new topics that we will be posting to this year. So if any of these topics are of interest to you, please click on the link and follow them so that you will have an email anytime we post new content. Just remember that these coffee chats are for you. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover or a challenge for the community, if there's any functionality that you would like us to address, we are happy to do that. Just contact me or Shanna. Happy to put that together for you. Here's a map for everyone who registered for the coffee chat today. It's fun to see where everyone's coming from. And just to get another idea of who is here today, Shanna, if you would launch the poll. What's your level of experience using IrisBG? Are you a novice, intermediate, advanced, or just trying out the trial? Looks like about half of you are intermediate and 20% advanced, 30% novice. It's great. And just a reminder, we won't have a coffee chat in January. So stay tuned for our February topic to be announced later. Today with us, we have Jena Portanova from Houston Botanic Garden. She will be talking about labeling a living collection, leveraging IrisBG's item management. So without further ado, we'll turn the controls over to you.
Fantastic. So good morning. My name, again, is Jena Portanova, and I'm the Plant Records Manager at the Houston Botanic Garden. I want to thank you all for having me and taking the time to watch this presentation on how I manage our living collections and the labeling via the IrisBG's item management tools. Now, I like to start with a quote by Dr. Noura Abdul Karim. Documentation should be systemized and structured to be useful, since data that are randomly organized and stored, as accurate and noteworthy they may be, are of limited value if the information cannot be traced, extracted, and updated. And so today I have the audience roadmap for you. We'll cover a little bit of background of the Botanic Garden, as well as the site area, the labels themselves, and then how my labeling workflow interacts with IrisBG, so queuing, tracking, proofing, and placing. Some considerations, as well as acknowledgements, and then if we have some time, questions and dialogue. So for our international community, this is a quick fly-through where Houston Botanic Garden is on our little blue dot. We're located in Houston, Texas, in the United States, amidst several ecoregions, and we have a lot of bird migrations along the Gulf of Mexico, making this area a biodiversity hub. Climatic conditions in the Houston are what I fondly refer to as wild. We essentially get all 4 seasons in a very short window, and then a very prolonged, humid tropical summer. Locals refer to it in 4 stages. We have early, mid, high, and late summer. So the lack of a proper winter season means activity in the garden for our horticulture team doesn't really lull. With ample sunshine and watering, we get nearly 45 to 50 inches on a regular year of rain in about 104 days. So plants seem to be in an endless state of growth. In terms of history, the garden itself is but a wee babe in the world of public gardens. We're still uncovering the historical significances of the site, both ecologically and culturally, but the garden only opened in September 2020 during the global pandemic. However, you see in this 1944 aerial image from the Texas Land Office, our 132-acre outline is largely unchanged. Once part of a historical 15,000-acre Allen Cattle Ranch, it was later the site of a country club, and then the Glenbrook Golf Course, which opened in the 1920s, and then later became a municipal golf course until its closing in 2018. The large drawn-in water feature in the middle of the map here does not exist until 1995, when the county and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers widened the bayou as part of a long-term flood control project. As we zoom forward to 2012, you can see the original bayou and the newly widened channel turn the northern half of our site into an island. As you see here, the original Sims Bayou, which we now refer to as the meander, is enclosing it. You can also see that a lot of those tree canopies, which are a lot of post oak and live oak, southern live oak, so our Quercus stellata and virginiana, a lot of those canopies still remained, although fewer. And you can also see a lot more features here that are reminiscent of the golf course. So here you see sand traps, as well as a large lagoon, and many, many pathways. As you fast forward to 2022, the garden proper, Houston Botanic, is now present. You see those canopies still remain, and we've made use of some of those existing developments, including the lagoon. The site is still a part of the city, and it was approved in 2015 to be leased by the Botanic Garden, with our living collections arriving shortly before opening in 2020. So these additional influxes of large volumes of plants, as well as 2 freeze events creating even more plants, has created a very large demand for both records and labeling, which I'm sure many of you can relate. So as we move on to the garden's mission, with our mission statement to enrich life through discovery, education, and the conservation of plants in the natural environment, it was clear to me that centralizing record management would be vital in supporting this mission. For me, that meant IrisBG to record accessions, as well as build plant profiles and to queue labels, to keep records of the plant, bed locations, and their coordinates, as well as the taxon information. So now on to our labels and how I label our living collections. How we meet our mission goals, and one way we achieve that is through our display labels. It is also very important to us that the data on our display labels meets data fidelity, or in the sense the degree to which data can be trusted to be accurate and reliable. Both the accessions and the plant profiles, which support our display labels, are sourced from the data from IrisBG. Pictured to the left, of course, is our example. And one way to describe how we use our display labels is for visitor engagement. It's a way that the visitors as well as staff can connect to the profile for the plant. And it's also a labor of love. Our leadership team are the ones that helped design the label, and in 2022, we saw approval to make these updates. And at this time is when we began to use IrisBG to manage those updates. Those updates included the information such as habitat and biomes, as well as sourcing those plant profiles into the database rather than separately. Our accession record tags are part of our living collection asset management, and they're our physical link to the accession record. As a general rule, every accession item would have an accession record label, with some exceptions. For example, recurring seasonals or culinaries that rotate often. However, a display label is only needed for a few plants representing that taxon in the garden. With such large acreage to account for and an ever-growing living collection, it was important to be able to track which accession items have or need a display label present in the beds. And this is where IrisBG and the accession item window come into play for us. So here on the left, you can see the accession tag, and below is kind of a templating of some of the information. And to the right here, you can see the fields that I export from our accession module window. We record things such as provenance code, propagation history, of course the genus, species, and infratypes, cultivar trade names, and we utilize origin name, which is sourced from our contacts. So we also store all of our contacts in IrisBG, which makes it very easy to sort and run and export reports. And then if it's wild collected, we also include locality information, the plant family, as well as the location code. And then zooming back to the display label, you can see this too is sourced from IrisBG, but instead of the accession module, we are sourcing this data from the taxon module. We also include cultivar trade name, as well as the taxon habitat and its native distribution. As you see this long list here, starting with ATRT, this is representing custom attributes that we've created in the taxon module for IrisBG. And each one of these are represented in the icons above. We also have a 3x size for trees or plants deeper in the bed, and we also manage that inside IrisBG. So returning to the accession record tag, you can see how that data is fed into each individual label. From there, I can create an Excel template to split the fields by character length for use in our embosser, which has very strict parameters onto these little metal tags. And this is the same window for display labels. You can see I'm in the taxon module now, and you can see which ones match up. So here, aquatic life would match up here to our fish icon. The majority of this information is in the Details tab, and the icons are tied to what we call custom attributes, targeted as a yes-no. You could use other ways, such as codes, but with the yes-no, it operates like a checkbox. And when we export that, it'll export in the field as true. These icons exist as a custom font outside of IrisBG, so they are not stored inside the database. And then our vendor is able to assign a letter to each of these fonts, and then it ends up on our display labels when they run it through their process. Our label workflow can be reduced to 4 areas of intersection with IrisBG. For our record tags, we queue a record tag, we prepare the data for export for use in Instant Card. Instant Card is a proprietary software for our embosser. Then we will run our embosser in small batch, and then place the record tags. Our type 1s are accession tags, and our type 2 are our display labels. We will also queue a display label, prepare the data for export, run the order and proof labels from vendor, and then receive and place those display labels. So an example of where you would queue this is we are inside the accessions item module of IrisBG, and you see here label type 1, the quantity, and then what its status is. In this particular accession record, you can see that I have one printed for this item, EA, and I'm queuing up a large display label, 1 need. So when I go to run my label report later, it will queue up for this particular accession record. So as we prepare labels in IrisBG, this would be the label report screen. And you can see that I can filter it as needed. There's a lot of different options. You can choose your accession year, and if you scroll down, there are a few others. And so this would be an example of me preparing a label for our vendor so that they can then import that data for their graphics department. This would be an example of the spreadsheet I sent to them. This formatting is a little extra. It's for me and proofing side of things. So I can notice what has been italicized, as well as do I have the right quantity of icons. When a report comes from IrisBG, the formatting is standard, and our vendor needs it as is. So I need these scientific names to be italicized and all characters to look as they would on the display label. And if we zoom in, you can see here, I've basically changed that true field into the associated font letter for the vendor. And I can at a glance go, oh, okay, that's correct. Or, oh, look, there's an icon missing for this particular plant profile. Now, there are cases where a plant profile may have more than 5. And so I take a count on the right, and then I whittle it down to which is the most information useful to the visitor. Following this, I have a short clip of our embosser for the accession tags. If the volume's working for you, this is your time to turn it down, but it is very fun to watch it in action. And so right before we run it, this is the accession tag report screen. And you can see that I have filtered it down to a location in our global collection garden. And I am looking for plants in this particular filter that need an accession tag, but already have a display label placed. This is useful for me because we are currently working on accreditation, and for accreditation purposes, we need those plants that are woody to have both a display label and an accession tag. So I can quickly focus in on particular areas of the garden that have that need. So this is our Instant Card software. This is how the data feeds into the embosser. The report that is spit out by IrisBG gets a little finessing. I have to use some formulas. I have to convert all those fonts to capital letters. And I also have to switch things like dots into asterisks and so forth. An example of some of those formulas, I don't expect you to read all these, that I use on the back end, I just copy. I basically just open up a window, it loads up, and then I copy the final output, paste as values, and then I source that into Instant Card. So it seems a little clunky, but it's a pretty good process and it works for us. Now, I mentioned before that I was going to run Rosie. It seems she's in the next slide, so I apologize for getting you ready to see Rosie, the embosser. But this would be our stage at which we run the labels. When we run the labels, I have statuses known as printed, ordered, and received. That's because I have a proofing process for our display labels, and when I want to pull up which labels were part of that order, I need to be able to do that quickly and not get it muddied with the ones that are also queued for future. Yep, and there's Rosie. All right, so I hope you enjoyed our little clip of Rosie the Embosser. I fondly refer to her as the plant records assistant. Now, moving on, we have proofs that come from our vendor. So a lot of this stuff is happening simultaneously for me. I'm running accession tags maybe daily for 1 week, and then I've got proofs that come in and halt everything while I come through. And so for our display label proofs, it's our chance to get one final look at what our taxon profile data looks like. I currently have a group of volunteers that are also helping me build plant profiles. And so this is a chance for me to go, oh, okay, is that in fact an edible plant? Does this cycad, do birds actually eat those seeds? So I can go, oh, wait, we need to fix that. This is actually beetle pollinated, and so forth. And so I will utilize the item management screen, which you see pictured here, to pull up all the labels that are part of the order. I can get counts as well as the status of the plant. So if at some time during the proofing process, since labels can run anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, if we suddenly had a plant disappear, die, get moved, I can quickly go, oh, this label needs to be canceled or tied to a different accession record item. This is also our taxon screen once again. So if I wanted to come in and say, hey, you know what? There's one more attribute that's missing, or I missed that on the setup process, let's add that and edit it here. I can also look at the proof and make sure that, hey, they loaded my data correctly and that the taxon name is spelled correctly. So then we move on to placing the labels. We've approved the proofs, we've printed our accession tags. So why do I still need to go to the item management window? And for me, it just closes the loop. And for here, I go and I log in every label that's arrived. It's sort of, think of it as asset management. You've just spent a lot of time and money on these labels. You need to make sure they're all accounted for. And so we do our checks here and add it into the system via the item management window. And then again, this is the window if I were to do it individually by accession record. If for any case someone has returned a display label from the garden, I can also update that here as inventory INB. Now, as I place labels and with the help of volunteers, I will utilize field maps. I'll go out and I will locate that plant. I'll have coordinate, stake it, and then I'll update the status. So I'll confirm the status that the plant is alive, as well as, hey, now we have a display label and or accession tag, depending on what I was placing at the time. This is also very helpful because, as you know, in plant records, there's a lot of pick up, set down, pick up, set down. And so having a tracking point at each step of the way means that I know where I left off. So there may be some considerations if you liked this process and were wanting to go forward with it. It is a very set it and forget it type thing with the queue, which is what I adore. I can go out, queue a bunch of things, update a bunch of plant actions from my team in horticulture, and go, oh, okay, we need labels. When I go to order, all I have to do is run a report. I don't have to track down all those notes. It does reduce human-assisted software errors, I like to call it. So if you're manually typing your label orders into Excel, it may autocorrect Araceae to Ericaceae plant family name, and then suddenly your alocasias are now called part of the palm family. Things you do not want to see. Also, the plant profile is supporting the accessions, but also future projects. So, for example, I can run an item accession report and find every medicinal plant in the garden and its location. So maybe I'm helping the education team or a volunteer build a very interactive tour. And on top of that, I can tell them if a label's present. And if it's not, and it's going to be part of a tour, I can then queue it for label for an order. So not only does it support my current needs for labeling, but I'm building a huge data bank for the future. Confirming label presence, as I mentioned before, is very important to us. One, asset management, but two, accreditations. They want to make sure, hey, have you labeled this for your visitors? And that is part of the process for documentation. There are some limitations. The display label lives as an item status, so it's not its own trackable item once it's left the accession. So if that accession is inactive, well, your display label can be marked as an inventory, but then where from there? That would be something you'd have to decide how to manage your display label inventory. It requires build out. So when I got approval in 2022 to do this, it seems like an arduous process. However, our display labels were already undergoing a process of creating plant profiles, but they weren't stored in a database. And to me, it seemed more useful that both are supporting each other. So when I'm building a plant profile and verifying the nomenclature, it's supporting my accession as well as our display labels, and then future projects 10 years down the line. The other thing with the process is the accessions must have items, and they must have locations and coordinates. is you can create accessions in IrisBG, and you can skip the item process completely if you don't wish to track that item history. But for my process, you would need to have individual coordinates, location codes, and item history, and the plant status would need to be active. So I'd like to say thank you, first and foremost, to my supervisor, Fran De La Moda, the director of horticulture at the Houston Botanic Garden. Without his support and leadership, many of my successes would not have been possible here at the garden. I'd also like to thank the leadership team at the Houston Botanic Garden. As a new and small and staff garden, we rely heavily on each other to make things happen while growing for our future, and their input and support has been valuable. As well as volunteers who have spent countless hours helping me inventory, place, and map our collections, as well as starting now to build those plant profiles. And then to IrisBG for granting me this time to share my process. And of course, all of you for taking the time to watch this presentation. Thank you. Special considerations to Renee over at Nameplate and Panel Technology, also known as My Plant Label. They run our fancy display labels. And Kevin over at Higgins 3, which help us source Rosie the embosser. I'd like to share just some of our general equipment and apps. I know many are curious how we run our process. We use a SIM Maxima 841 embosser, CR80 aluminum cards, which are basically credit card size. Our display labels are photoreactive aluminum on steel brackets. And we utilize 3 stake sizes because plants can grow quite quickly out here in Houston, and so you may need to change from a low to a mid to a high size. For mapping, we use a Geo GNS2 receiver. It has decimeter accuracy. I find more times than not, it's somewhere around 60 centimeters to 1 meter. It's durable and weatherproof and works for our purposes. We also have an AT&T Netgear hotspot because we do not have site-wide internet over our 132-acre site. And we're currently using Cedar C28 tablets. Any tablet would probably do, but for our climate, it gets hot, it gets wet, and things can overheat. So these work really well for us. And then we utilize field maps on those tablets. And then some references.
Thank you again, Jena, for putting together such a great presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Fantastic. We'll see you in the new year.
All right.
Thank you.